Mercy Me is coming to Pittsburgh, the Together Again tour with Mercy Me, Crowder, and special guest Andrew Ripp, Thursday, October 5th. Bring your family and friends to the PPG Paints Arena in Pittsburgh for Mercy Me, Crowder, and Andrew Ripp live in concert. 3 multiple award-winning artists on one stage for one night. Let your spirit soar, your heart sing, and your faith ignite. Mark your calendars for Thursday, October 5th. Get your tickets now at mercyme.org.
I had, awards and recognitions, and I was being promoted. I became an executive at 23 years old of a Fortune 100 company. And all these people were looking at me and they were like, wow, you are the definition of so-called made it. They didn't know I was dying inside.
Hey y'all, welcome to the Christy Wright Show. I'm so excited because today we are having a really important conversation. We're going to talk about a person that you need to be kind to. It's going to be a good one. And then I get to sit down with my new friend, Nona Jones. She's an author, she's a speaker, she's brilliant when it comes to leading initiatives at Facebook and her role there. And she's just a really awesome person. And she's going to have some incredible wisdom for us from her story of overcoming her past and how to find hope in the future. But first, let's talk about this person that we need to learn to be kind to. Now, let me start by sharing a story with you from when I was 16. So I had just gotten my driver's license. Now, I don't know if you remember this, but this is a really exciting time. Like, you are free, you are somewhat independent because you can take yourself places and you don't have to ask for a ride. So this was a big deal. I think I'd had my license for maybe like 2 weeks, okay? And I will never forget, I was driving down Nolensville Road, which is about 3 miles from my house now today, but also where I grew up. And I was coming up on a red light. Now, Nolensville Road, the speed limit is maybe like 40 miles an hour, I think. So I was going maybe 35, maybe 40. I wasn't speeding. But as I'm approaching the light was yellow, and I knew by the time I got to the light, it was going to be red. So I could either slam on the gas and try to run it, or I could hit my brakes kind of hard and I could stop for the red light. Well, I made a decision in that moment to hit the brakes. I thought, I don't want to speed. I don't want to run a red light. I'm barely 16. I don't want to get a ticket. I'm going to try to stop for this light. Now, it was an aggressive stop, but it wasn't slamming on the brakes. So I hit the brakes gradually but quickly and stopped for the red light. Well, the car behind me didn't. The car behind me thought that I was going to run it, and they were going to try to run it as well. So instead of hitting their brakes, they hit the gas, and they gunned it right into the back of my car. Y'all, I was so scared. Thankfully, I was okay. My seatbelt caught me. I had a little bit of a whelp mark here, and of course, we had to call the police, and they came out and all of that stuff. I was not at fault. I was safe. They were safe. We were all okay. But what's interesting is that moment, that experience of getting in a car wreck when I was barely 16 years old and one of my first times driving by myself truly scarred me. It may not sound like a big deal, and of course we all turned out okay, but to this day, when I'm driving my car and I have to hit my brakes quickly for a red light that's turning red, every single time, y'all, I look in my rearview mirror and I go, don't hit me, don't hit me, don't hit me. Every single time. Because why? Because I was scarred by that experience. Now, I know that seems like a silly example, but we all have experiences in life, growing up, in our childhood, in our past, and especially relationally, that wound us, that scar us. I have those too. I have a lot more of those examples that don't have to do with the car wreck that I'm not comfortable sharing on my show, but you know what? You have them as well. We all have them. We all have wounds from things people have done or things people have said. If you don't have a wound at your age in your life, you're not human. We've all been hurt. Now, maybe yours wasn't some traumatic event in your family. Maybe it was something where someone was really mean to you your first day of middle school. The cool kids left you out and wouldn't let you sit at the lunch table. People called you dumb. Someone said you were fat behind your back. People gossiped about you. Maybe you didn't make the sports team. There are things that happen to us, big and small, from people that mean a lot to us and people that don't mean anything to us. But either way, the same result happens. It hurts us. And what's interesting is these wounds from our past, these experiences, even if they seem insignificant in your memory, you're going, why do I even still think about that? Why do I even care about that? Whether we realize it or not, they have shaped us. And in many cases, they still affect us to this day. I remember when my husband and I were very early on dating. Now, we met in a running group. I've talked about that before, but I don't think I've shared this story where one of the very first times we hung out, just him and I, it was kind of a day date where we had gone to REI, we got some ice cream. I ended up finding a bike on Craigslist because I wanted to buy a bike and learn to cycle, and Matt went with me to go pick up this bike. So we come back to the house, we're at my house, and Matt knows bikes. He had taken classes on bike mechanics or something, so he knew how to clean the bike, check the gears, all the stuff, and so he was checking it out for me, which is super nice. But I'll never forget, we're sitting on my deck, and it's like a summer night, and I'm so excited about my new bike, and we're kind of flirting, kind of dating, kind of exploring if we're dating. What does this mean? Because we've been friends for 6 months at this time, 7 months. And Matt was working on the bike, and he asked me a question about the bike. I can't remember what the question was, but he asked me something like, so does this go here or here? And I thought he was genuinely asking me. I said, I don't know, I think it goes there. He said, it goes here. I shut down. Because in that moment, what my innocent now husband was trying to do was just be playful and quiz me on, does this go here or here, whatever the mechanic was. But to me, it was an immediate trigger from a wound in childhood. It felt like he was trying to trap me in a lie or catch me doing something wrong. And I shut down. Over a bike mechanical question? Yo, that's crazy. That's weird. He was totally innocent. He didn't mean a single thing by it. But that just shows how we all have wounds, triggers, things that come out in our day-to-day life as grown adults, as grown men and women that show how there is something in our inner child. There is something from our past. There's something from those wounds that still affects us to this day. And what we try to do as responsible grown-ups is we try to dust ourselves off, pick ourselves up, pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. We try to cover up the wound, pretend the wound's not there, dismiss the wound, try to just stay so busy we forget about the wound. We try to completely ignore it, but it's still there. And it still affects us. Those hurts, those labels, those names people called you. I remember another silly example. I remember being on the school bus, and I think I was in maybe 5th or 6th grade, and I was really shy. I know this is hard for you to believe today. I was really shy growing up. I was an only child, so I didn't have a sibling to walk into new classrooms with. And so I was always really shy. So I would get on the school bus, and I would find a seat, and I would just sit by myself. We didn't have cell phones that we stared at. I didn't bring a book. I just would sit by myself. And I remember there were these boys that would taunt me. They're like, why are you just staring there? Why are you just staring? What are you staring at? Are you stone-faced? Hello? And I was so humiliated. I didn't know what to say. I didn't have words to stand up for myself. It made me that much more shy and that much more embarrassed. And still to this day, when someone catches me deep in thought, or maybe I'm just not paying attention, someone goes, hey, smile. Why aren't you smiling? I'm like, nothing will get the exact opposite response from me than telling me to smile, except maybe telling me to calm down. You will get the opposite response. Why? Because that's a trigger for me. Because immediately I'm back to 5th grade and someone's calling me stone face on the school bus. I don't know what that is for you. I don't know if it's a name someone called you, if it's a person that hurt you. I don't know if you went through some kind of trauma, disappointment, heartbreak, losing someone, having to deal with something well before you should have ever had to deal with it. I don't know what that is for you. We all have different degrees of hurt or heartbreak. And as silly as it may seem that someone called me a name on a school bus, or I felt like Matt was trying to trap me doing something wrong, those things affect us. But I think what's so beautiful is there is an opportunity for us to find freedom and healing. So often we want to dismiss the wound or pretend it's not there or cover it up. But instead, that's actually the spot we have to go to. Freedom comes through the wound, not around it, not ignoring it. That we are willing to lean in and let God into that part of our heart and into that part of our life and find healing there. When we learn to have compassion on that inner child. When you think of that young girl or that young boy that experienced that went through that was called that was hurting in that way, that instead of being mad at him or her or embarrassed or pretend like you don't care, I don't care, that instead you would go back there in bravery and have compassion on her, have compassion for him, like you would any child that went through anything. So I don't know what that looks like for you, but I just want to invite you to find compassion for yourself, find compassion for your past. Most of all, find compassion for your inner child, for that little girl or little boy that still is triggered by things that might be a little too familiar, reminding you of something that hurt from the past. When you look in the rearview mirror and go, don't hit me, don't hit me, don't hit me. Because that experience still shapes you today. I pray that God would come into those places and heal you there as you, in bravery, lean into those spots to find that healing. All right, y'all, I'm so excited because I get to sit down with one of my real life great friends, author and speaker, Nona Jones. Nona, thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. This is such an honor.
So you and I met on Better Together, I think, a while back. And I just was instantly so impressed with you. And I was like, I just want to make this one my friend. And so we have gotten to stay in touch. We've had some phone calls about business life, all the things. But for anyone that's watching right now and they're not familiar with you, tell everyone a little bit about what you do.
Sure. Well, I wear a number of hats. During the day, my hat is I serve as the head of global faith partnerships at Facebook. It's a small tech startup. Some people may have heard of it, but I love the work I get to do there. And then my husband and I also pastor a local church in Gainesville, Florida. I have two incredible sons. They're 8 years old and 11 years old. And I also have a ministry. So I get to travel around the world and share the good news of Jesus. And I really love the opportunity to also write books and just try to share the love of God with so many. So thank you for inviting me to share more about myself.
Well, it's been so fun to see your journey. And, you know, one of the things that's been really cool to see how you do wear all these hats, which I think is so relatable for everyone watching and listening, because many of the women, and I know men as well, but they just feel like, gosh, I'm doing so many things. And I feel like you are such a great example of someone that's doing a lot of things, but you're not in this state of chaos and overwhelm. You've just got this ease about you, and I think it's so inspiring. And I know that, you know, one of the things that's really cool about you, Nona, is you share so much of your story in an effort to inspire others. And one of the things I didn't know about you until recently is your story has some pain in your past, and you have, found healing from that. And that's one of the things that seems to be an undercurrent of the books that you write. And you're even telling me about the new book you're working on right now that's coming out next year. Talk a little bit about how you have found healing and how you want to help other people find healing as well.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of times we walk into the successful chapter that a person's life is on, and we just assume that's the whole story.
Sure.
But in my case, I am a survivor of childhood sexual and physical abuse. As a matter of fact, I was 5 years old the first time my mother's boyfriend assaulted me, and it happened repeatedly for many years. And I finally worked up the courage to tell my mother what was happening. And on the day of his release from jail, she actually took me with her to pick him up and brought him back home where the abuse resumed. And, between his abuse and my mother being physically and verbally abusive, I became one of those children in school that was labeled a problem child. I was told I had a learning disability. All of these labels were placed on me, so much so that when I was 9 years old, I tried to take my life. I had no consciousness of better. I had no consciousness of hope. Didn't grow up in a Christian home, didn't know anything about God, Jesus, the Bible, none of that. But I just felt like death was the better alternative to what I was experiencing in life. And of course, it wasn't successful, but I tried again at 11 years old to take my life. And I did it that time by trying to slit my wrists. And I actually have a permanent scar on the inside of my left wrist, which is a reminder of God's faithfulness to me. And it was shortly after that a friend of mine invited me to church. And again, I didn't know what church was. And so here I was, an 11-year-old survivor of 2 suicide attempts, someone who had experienced incredible abuse sexually and physically and emotionally and verbally. And I walk into this church with this group of people I'd never heard of before, never seen before. And they were so loving and affirming and welcoming. And the very first sermon I ever heard, the pastor said, God is a father to the fatherless. And what he didn't know is my father had actually passed away 2 months shy of my second birthday. And he wanted to be a dad. Like, he wanted nothing more than to be a father. And I knew that from an early age. And so there were so many nights that I would cry myself to sleep, wishing that my father was alive, because I felt like if he had lived, then I would not have experienced what I had experienced. And so to hear this person say, God is a father to the fatherless, I was immediately like, who is this God? And that set me on a journey to discovering not only who was God, but who was I because of who God is. And I think that's what really started my trajectory toward healing.
Nona, I didn't know all of that. I knew pieces of that, but I had no idea that all of that happened. Talk a little bit about you today, right? Like, you're writing books and you're like paving away at Facebook, and you have amazing children, amazing family. No one would ever look at you and know that you'd been through that. Yeah. No one would ever look at you and know that that was your childhood, that was your past. What has this journey been like in terms of from that day that you went to church and learned that God is a father to the fatherless, in a spiritual sense, but also in a practical sense? So like the work that you've done, because that's not a small thing to overcome emotionally, spiritually, physically. I mean, all of that. Talk a little bit about what that has looked like for you.
Well, I give you that backstory because, I've been very, very blessed throughout my career. As a matter of fact, even though I was labeled a problem child and I was told I had a learning disability, I ended up graduating near the top of my class in high school, went to college on a full academic scholarship. God just blessed me, and he literally reversed all the labels that were placed on me. But when I graduated from college and I went into corporate America, I found myself in situations where people would give me feedback, or they would give me, just critique, constructive criticism. And I would take it so personally. Like, it would literally break my heart. I would do the most I could to try to be perfect. If there was a presentation I was giving, I was trying to make it perfect. But I came to discover that perfection is in the eye of the beholder. And what really happened was, as I started to do the work and I started to pray and ask God, why is this bothering me so much when someone says something that really shouldn't bother me? God began to take me back to my childhood. And he began to bring up all those times my mother said she didn't want me, all those times that she took her boyfriend back, knowing what he was doing to me. And what that did is it created a fractured identity. It made me see myself as less than. It made me see myself as expendable. And so, yes, I was building success in a traditional sense. I had, awards and recognitions, and I was being promoted. I became an executive at 23 years old of a Fortune 100 company. And all these people were looking at me and they were like, wow, you are the definition of so-called made it. But they didn't know I was dying inside. And the reason why is that there was territory, there was ground in my heart that was still broken. And I talk about it in my book. The reason why I even called it Success from the Inside Out is because, in the book of Joshua, chapter 1, verse 8, God says something really interesting to Joshua that got my attention. Moses dies at the end of Deuteronomy, and then Joshua is about to take the children of Israel into the promised land. And God says to him in verse 8, he says, meditate in my word day and night. Do not turn from the right or the left. Then you will make your way prosperous and you will have good success. That word good, the qualifier good to describe success, means that there is a success that is not good.
Right.
And so it really helped me to understand that I was experiencing success, but it was not good because I was broken. And the reason why I was broken is because I kept asking God, why did this happen to me? Why did my mother not want me? Why did she not love me? And because I was so fixated on that, I could not understand and experience and receive the goodness that God had created in my life. And I think that was the journey. Like, the journey for me was understanding that until I released the need to understand why I was hurt in my past, I could not experience the beauty and the glory that God was trying to build in my future. And so I think the entire point of my life, I believe, is to really demonstrate to people that when you surrender your pain and your brokenness and your trauma, and you surrender it to God and you allow his word to speak life into it, it can become a ministry that blesses other people, and it will create good success.
Yeah, I love that. I love that clarification because I never knew that. I've heard that verse before and never knew that it was good success. So that is so interesting, and you make such a great point. I want to talk about this idea of trauma because I know that you talk about that. You use that word when you're helping people, coaching people through your writing. And Nona, as terrible as everything you went through has been, I know a lot of women have been through other things, different things, maybe things from the outside that seem not as bad as that, but almost I feel like there can be a danger in that, where they feel like, well, because I didn't have this, terrible traumatic childhood, that they have situations from their childhood, or maybe even trauma from their childhood. They wouldn't call it that, but that is affecting them as an adult. This is a random example, but I've even about a year ago, my son Carter slipped below the surface at a pool, and it was like 1 second. It was like I was there, I got him. It was 1 second, but that one event, that one second that felt like an hour, was really traumatic for me. I cried for days and days. I couldn't get out of my mind. And when I talked to my counselor about it, because I just couldn't stop crying, he said, "Christy, that was trauma." I was like, well, that wasn't trauma, right? Like, it was just like, it was 1 second and I got him. Yep. But I think that a lot of times we can dismiss traumatic instances.
Yes.
Well, my dad wasn't that bad. Or that wasn't, all kids are mean. I got bullied, but it was no big deal. But these traumatic events or seasons or circumstances we go through as children or any time in life, when we don't acknowledge them, when we don't name them, when we don't identify that they are in fact trauma, they can continue to really affect us. Talk a little bit about that, because I think so many women might be watching right now and be like, well, I didn't go through that. I'm fine. And we've got adults walking around with trauma from their past or childhood that is affecting who they are today, and they can't deal with it because they don't acknowledge that it happened. Talk a little bit about what you see in the women that you work with.
Yeah, well, I appreciate this question so much. Well, let me first say, there is a clinical definition of trauma, but I'm not going to share that with you because it doesn't matter. What matters is the definition of trauma that I think you and others can relate to, which is simply this. Trauma is anything that happens to you that causes you to see yourself and the world around you differently. What do I mean about that? So let's take the example of your son, right? And so, this horrible thing happens to your son. And of course, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm glad it's over. Like, he's okay. But every time you walk by a pool, you're reminded of what happened, and your heart starts to quicken, right? Just because of what happened. That's what trauma does. Trauma changes the way that you experience the world. And in my case, when I got into business leadership, I became incredibly ambitious, not ambitious in a good way. There's good ambition, and then there's toxic ambition. Good ambition is you want to do something that's amazing because you know it's going to impact other people's lives and it's going to make the world a better place. I had toxic ambition, and I tell you that because I used my position and my titles and my promotions as essentially a proxy for my worth. And so I would be super competitive when there really wasn't even a competition. I would just make things a competition because I had to be the best. I had to be first. I had to be the youngest. I had to be everything, because if I wasn't, then I saw that as affirming what my mother said. If I was not the best, if I was not the first, if I did not get the title immediately, then I was not worthy. And that's what trauma does. Is trauma, it really distorts the way that you see yourself, and it distorts the way that you see the world. And so really, ministry is, in my view, my ministry is about helping people see themselves clearly. But how do you see yourself clearly? You see yourself through the Word of God.
That's right.
The Word of God restores 20/20 vision to who we are, which is why, where it says, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. The first part of that verse, it says, I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. What that means is once you recognize who you are, you will praise God. You will no longer walk with your head held low. You will no longer have your shoulders slumped. You will no longer look at other people as your competition. You will no longer let other people become the measuring stick for your worth, because you know that your Creator decided that you were necessary. You were here purposefully. You're not an accident. And so again, trauma changes the way that you see yourself and see the world, but the Word of God has the power to restore your vision so that you can clearly see who you are and who God created you to be.
I think that is so powerful. And I think it's one of those things that everyone listening right now is going, yeah, I want that. You know, and anybody watching and listening that is a believer that reads their Bible, like we know it intellectually, but sometimes it's hard to get it from your head to your heart and to live from that. And, you know, one of the things I've seen, Nona, when it comes to this issue of trauma, this idea, there tends to be two extremes, I feel like. On the one extreme, we don't name it. We pretend like it didn't happen, like, oh, it's not that big. I'm fine. That wasn't that bad, right? I'm not as bad as whatever this happened to this person. So it still affects us because we won't acknowledge that it is traumatic. That's one camp. The other camp is the other extreme, which is we just are victims to it, right? We just live in it. Well, you don't know what happened to me. Well, you don't know what happened to me. Well, you don't know how bad I've had it. And so is there a healthy middle? Is there a healthy middle where we can name it and acknowledge it and find healing there? It doesn't have to hold us back. Talk a little bit about, you know, those extremes and what that should look like.
Absolutely. You know, as you were talking, and I didn't even put this example in my book, but it just came to me. You know, most people, if you've been in church at any point, you have probably heard about the story of the woman caught in adultery, right? And I've always found that an interesting story because this is the woman caught in adultery, like it's just her. Right, but anyway, let's just not, we're not even going to go there. The one woman who was in adultery by herself. Anyway, but she's caught in adultery and you have these people standing around her and they're getting ready to stone her, right? And they're like, oh my gosh, you know, she's horrible. She deserves to die. That's what the law says. And, you know, Jesus, you know, he's kind of there and they're basically like, yeah, she should be stoned, right? And he's like, yeah, anyone who's without sin, go ahead and do it. And the thing that I want to draw your attention to is after that whole thing transpires and he goes up to her, he tells her, go and sin no more. The reason why that's important is because the middle space between denial and just full, like, you know, consumption with, you know, the trauma is acknowledgement. Is simply acknowledging that this thing happened. It happened and it hurt and it was wrong and it was painful, whether it was something that was done to you or something that you did to somebody else. I know that we also experience the trauma of the things that we do to other people that are hurtful. Yeah. We have to first acknowledge what happened, whether it was what happened to us or something that we did. Because what I've learned is trauma typically, it multiplies in areas of shame. What is shame? Shame is different than guilt. We use those words interchangeably, but guilt is about the mistake I made. Shame is about what I believe about myself because of it. And so when you are in trauma and you have shame, the first thing you want to do is hide. It doesn't matter. It's okay. Or when you're ashamed, you want to fully wear it. Like, this thing happened to me and I can never change. This is who I am. When you acknowledge it, shame loses its power because shame thrives in dark places. And so that's why I believe when Jesus says he is the light of the world, that also means that he's the one that comes to expose trauma to light so that we can experience healing and we can actually step into the way that he's called us to walk.
Yeah. You think of so many verses that come to mind of him as the light, you know, that even darkness is not dark to him. Like, there's people maybe listening right now and they go, oh, but you don't know about me. And it's like God's light is brighter than that even still. And I love that reminder. Nona, one of the things that I think is so powerful is as you find healing, it really does give you a different foundation that you are building your life on. And you talk about this in your book, Success from the Inside Out. There's the work on the inside you have to do. And then from that, you have a different level of strength, a different level of confidence, a different level of even how you look at your life. Talk a little bit about from that healing place. And I know it's not just you flip a switch and it's done, but from that healing place, what that looks like, because you help so many women figure out what success looks like for them and achieve it. You work with high-performing individuals. Talk a little bit about kind of on the other side of that, what that looks like.
Oh, thank you for this question. You know, I have a leadership academy that I've been running for a couple years now. And, you know, because you do this so incredibly well, like when you talk about business leadership, you talk about strategic leadership, people immediately want to jump into what are the tips, what are the tactics, you know, like give me the business plan, give me that, what do I do? But the reality is, because we're all carrying a certain degree of trauma, if we don't start there and we don't get healed, we very well may, you know, choose a goal and we may achieve the goal, but what we won't experience is good success. I mean, you know, there are so many people that have achieved material wealth who ended up taking their lives. They literally felt like they had nothing worth living for. And so many of us are like, that's what I want. And so I like to start with healing the brokenness, because I feel like until you heal what hurts, you can't experience good success. And so what it looks like first, again, is acknowledgement. It's acknowledging that, hey, this thing hurt. Maybe it was a critique that a boss gave you. Maybe it was a parent who never affirmed you. Maybe it was your spouse who cheated on you or walked out on you. And, you're trying to walk around like, oh, it didn't bother me. I'm over it. That was so long ago. But the reality is time does not heal all wounds. It's what we do with the time that heals the wounds. And so we have to do the work. I think, again, with acknowledgement, the second part is forgiveness. This is the hardest part, is when somebody hurts us, especially if they never apologize. But one of the things I learned in my own healing journey is that apologies have no power. We think they do. We think if somebody just apologized for how they hurt me, then I could get over it. But the truth is, God gave us the power to heal simply through forgiving the person for what they did. And that is the love of God, is that we're not waiting on anybody to apologize. Right. If they do, praise God. But if they don't, we can still get free today. And after we forgive, then we begin to seek God for, Lord, what is your will for my life? What is it that you want me to pursue? What is it that you want me to go after, so that we're not just setting arbitrary goals? Because the definition of success is achieving that which you set out to achieve. But the problem is, what if what you set out to achieve is the wrong goal? You think it's the right goal, and you think that's the goal that's going to make me feel whole. That's the goal that's going to make me feel worthy. And you achieve it, and you realize that there are no periods, there are only commas. You get that thing, and then there's another thing, and then there's another thing. And the reason is because you're not whole. So I do think it's acknowledgement, it's forgiveness, and then it's really seeking the face of God for what is it that he wants you to do, and pursuing that so that you will experience good success.
Oh, it's so good, Nona. Man, that one line, I want to say that a million times. Time does not heal all wounds. It's what you do with the time that heals all wounds. Nona is so good. And you're going to be speaking at Business Boutique in October, which I'm so excited about. Yes. I know so many people are going to love to hear from you. Before we wrap up, tell everybody where they can follow you, find your book, Success from the Inside Out, and see everything that you're up to.
Oh, for sure. Well, you can connect with me on all my social. I have the same handle, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. It's at Nona, not Nora. The reason for that is very simple. Ever since I got married and my last name became Jones, everyone's calling me Nora Jones. I really wish I was a multi-Grammy award winning artist. I am not. I was speaking at a conference in Sydney, Australia, and the people introduced me as a multi-Grammy award winning artist. And I was like, these people are going to be so disappointed.
That's so it's amazing.
It's Nona, not Nora. And you can also connect with me. My website is nonajones.com.
Oh my gosh. I never knew that was the backstory of your handle, but that's amazing.
Oh yeah.
That is so funny. Nona, you're awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for being a light and just sharing such truth with us today. Thanks for being here.
Oh, you're such a blessing. I cannot wait to see you in person and be with everyone soon.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, y'all, now I get to answer some of your questions that you sent in, which is one of my favorite parts of the show. All right, let's see here. We've got, is it even possible to start your own business with littles and plans to have more kiddos? Yes, it is possible. But here's what you need to do when it comes to anything with little kids. You need to set realistic expectations. Set realistic expectations of how much time you're going to have, how much energy you're going to have, how much you're going to want to do. And oh, by the way, be willing to reset and reset and reset those expectations when life actually happens. Because if you already have kids, you know, kids are unpredictable. Kids can derail your plans faster than about anybody. So you need to be ready to adapt. You need to be willing to give yourself grace and reset your plans and expectations when and if things go different than you think they will, which they always do, especially when it comes to kids. One of the things that I would encourage you, when it comes to starting a business with little kids, is to work around their schedule. So set yourself up for success knowing when they sleep, when they nap, when they wake up. For example, my third child, my daughter, Mary Grace, she sleeps so late. Y'all, it is such a huge blessing. We did not experience that with my first two boys, but this girl will sleep until 8, 8:30, 9 o'clock. So there's a lot of time in the morning and especially on Saturday mornings where I can work on something. I can clean, I can play with the boys, I could do something. What does that look like for you? If you have kids that sleep late, first of all, congratulations. Second of all, you could use that time. You could set your alarm early and work while they sleep, work on that business. You could also do it during nap time, or you could do it during the evening. I would just encourage you to plan your time working on your business around your kids' schedule. If they're in preschool, you can work when they're in preschool. And of course, if you want to have help, you can look into that option as well in order to focus on your business. Just be realistic about what you're expecting of yourself and your business, and by the way, your kids before you go down that route. But yes, you can definitely do it. All right, let's answer another one here. Let's see. We've got how to juggle my current job while building up a side gig to become my main job. I love this question and I get it a lot. Here's what you need to know. Speaking of realistic expectations, if you want the side thing to become the main thing, you need to know that for a season, it's going to feel like you're working 2 full-time jobs because you are. Because you want the side thing to be the main thing. So in order for you to build it up enough financially and from a time standpoint on the side to support you, where when you leave the main job, it doesn't feel like this terrifying leap. It's the next logical step. It can support you financially. You've got to build it up to almost the same level. It doesn't have to be the exact same level, but it needs to be close. You don't need to be making $75,000 in your full-time job and you get your side business to $10,000 and you think that's time to make the step. It's not a step, that's a leap. And it's a scary fall whenever you fall short. So what I want you to do is build the side business up enough where that amount of money that you are bringing home from the side business can support you. Now, if you're making $75,000 in your full-time job, for example, you don't have to build this up to $75,000. Let's say you can build it up to 50 or 60. If you can live on that, you're ready to make that step. But for a season, as you're building this up and up and up, and you're working nights and you're working weekends and you're waking up early and you're staying up late, it's gonna feel like you're working 2 full-time jobs because you are. But just remember what your goal is. Your goal is to work on this side thing full-time. And in order to do that in this season, we're gonna work 2 full-time jobs. We're gonna get that side business where it needs to be financially, where it can support you. And when you get there, guess what? You're gonna have a huge increase in time and peace of mind and rest because you're gonna be able to quit that full-time job and you're gonna be able to work on the business full-time just like you wanted. And you are now only working 1 full-time job and it's your dream job. It's your business and it was all worth it. Just know in that season, it's gonna be exhausting, but it's just a season. I hope that encouraged you and I hope it helps you get through this tough season as you're doing that. All right, let's do one more. How do I get my wife to have more confidence in herself and her business? I love this question. First of all, the fact that you're asking shows me how much you care about your wife. So well done. That is really cool, really impressive, really admirable that you love her and you want her to believe in herself like you believe in her. And for her to see in herself what you see in her, what a good husband for writing that in. So thank you for that. The second thing I would say is you can't. I know it was like good news and the bad news. Like, oh, good job. You can't. You can't get her to have confidence. You can't make her feel something, make her do something, because you know she's her own person, just like you have experienced probably in other aspects of your marriage. You can't make someone feel something. You can't make someone care. You can't make someone do anything. Here's what you can do. You can encourage things that build confidence. So for example, let's say that there's something that she wants to do, but she's a little bit scared. You can encourage her, coach her, love her, support her, help her think it through, help her process it in order to do that thing. Because when she does things that she's afraid of, guess what happens? It builds confidence. So let's say, I'm just gonna make up a scenario to carry this out for an example for you. Let's say that she wants to do a Facebook Live. I'm making that up. Or she wants to sign up for a class at a community college, or she wants to join a book club. Fill in the blank with whatever the thing is. She wants to do it, but she's scared of it. You can encourage her to do that. You can say, what would it be like? Oh, what if we meet people ahead of time? What if I go with you? What if you do a Facebook Live and you set it to private and no one actually sees it? Or what you could just help encourage her, put all the safety nets, all the encouragement, all the support. I'll go with you. We could try it on a low risk level to help her do that thing that she wants to do that she's afraid of. Because when she does things that she wants to do that she's afraid of and she faces her fear, it builds confidence. And then it's like, oh, wow, you did it. You did awesome. Well, let's do it again and not take off the privacy setting on Facebook. Or, oh, you've already met all those people at book club, so now let's just show up to the first book club. Or, oh, you've already talked to the instructor of the class. Why don't we just go ahead and register? Like it's just the next logical step. And you just encourage her to take these steps of faith, take these steps into her fear. And as she does that, through practice, through reps, she will build confidence. You can't make her have confidence, but you can encourage her in the direction of actions that builds confidence. I tell people all the time, the antidote to fear is action. Nothing will silence your fear of doing the thing like doing the thing, so go do the thing so you can encourage her to do those things that build that confidence that you hope for her. But well done. Great question, and what a supportive spouse to even ask it. Thanks for writing in. All right, y'all. Of course, you can tune in next week for another new episode of The Christy Wright Show. And as always, for more encouragement on becoming the person you want to be, you can visit ChristyWright.com.
Mercy Me is coming to Pittsburgh, the Together Again tour with Mercy Me, Crowder, and special guest Andrew Ripp, Thursday, October 5th. Bring your family and friends to the PPG Paints Arena in Pittsburgh for Mercy Me, Crowder, and Andrew Ripp live in concert. 3 multiple award-winning artists on one stage for one night. Let your spirit soar, your heart sing, and your faith ignite. Mark your calendars for Thursday, October 5th. Get your tickets now at mercyme.org.